Good afternoon. We're going to talk about a concept called promises. This will be pretty fun. Okay. Before we even talk about it or do any code, I want to kind of present you with a scenario. So every morning when we come in here to do algos, I get asked if I want coffee. I don't. But that's okay because I appreciate you asking me, V. Thank you very much. Let's say I did ask him to go get me some coffee, right? Say, yeah, go get me this thing or whatever. V says, okay, I promise I'll be back in 15 minutes. Okay? And he never comes back, yeah. Like this is kind of this is kind of what I was getting at, right? Just because V told me that he promised that he was going to do something, is that really a guarantee that I'm going to get that coffee in, as much time as he said it was?
If Viz said it, for sure, yeah.
Oh, if you said it, yeah, without question, right? Okay.
I've never been past 15 minutes.
Okay. Now, is it possible, though, that you start walking down the street or whatever, and yeah, I mean, obviously there's that or something, or somebody stops you, pulls you against your will, and is like, hey, V, you can't go anywhere. There are tons and tons of possibilities that could prevent that from happening, right? All sorts of different things. Or he could go down the street and just decide, you know what? I'm tired of this boot camp. I don't even want to go back. I'm done with this, right? So he just goes along his merry way, and I never see my coffee. Okay?
Never mind V.
Yeah, man, I just want my coffee. Jesus. Yeah, you promised me that coffee. So that's kind of the scenario that I want you guys to keep in the back of your mind, is that just because somebody said they were going to do something, there's no real guarantee that that's actually going to happen, right? Okay? It's just this idea that, well, hopefully this person will follow through and do what they said they would do. And depending on how trustworthy that person is, the value of that promise might be a lot, or it might be like, yeah, I don't even believe this person's going to do this, right? That's just like a bogus promise. Okay, so in order to kind of talk about this concept, what I thought we would do is we would fake like we had some sort of a database, okay? And inside that database, we're just going to put some planets. So I'm going to say const planets. It's just going to be an object. And what we're going to do is we're going to have some different indices representing the different planets in our solar system. So the 0 index, the first planet is Mercury,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. What's second one, Venus? Oh, why did I put a comma? Venus, Mars. Where's the, did someone say where's the sun? That's not one of the planets.
What happened to Earth?
Earth is fourth, right? Or third, right?
Third.
Yeah, we're next to it, guys.
No, we're Earth.
We're before Mars?
Before Mars. We're before Mars.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, now Earth is not livable anymore.
I'm a dummy then. I'm sorry.
Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars.
Okay, next. Jupiter.
Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune.
I'm very educated, not a just served us noodles.
Saturn. Uranus. What was the next one? Neptune?
I'm very educated,
Yes,
not a
Uranus and Neptune.
Neptune, and then finally Pluto.
It's not a planet anymore.
Is Pluto a planet? Yeah, I was going to ask. Is that really the case?
Right. It wasn't a planet, and it became a planet.
It was a planet, it got demoted, it got re-promoted.
All right, let's just pretend like it still is. The good old days, right? All right, cool.
There's another one, I forget the name of it. It's like a number.
All right. So we're pretending like Pluto's a planet. Now let's create some kind of function that will actually allow me to reach into my database and go grab a planet by ID. Okay? All right, so let's just create this function. We'll say function get planet. It's going to take in some ID. And then what I'm going to do, I'm trying to fake something to pretend like this reaching into the database is going to take a little bit of time. it's not necessarily going to happen right away, right? Okay, so in order to fake that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this setTimeout function that we've kind of been playing with here and there. So I'm going to say setTimeout. And then what setTimeout takes is going to be two things. I need a callback function that I want to run. Okay. We'll just kind of like leave that open for now, and then we'll say how long do we want this to take. I was thinking we'll just make it random. So we'll say something like math.floor, and then we'll say math.random times, let's say we could take as much as 2 seconds, right? Okay. So that's how long it could take. It could be anywhere from 0 to 2 seconds, something like that. And then inside this setTimeout, let's do a little check, right? Let's see if we can find that that ID inside of our database. Because what if somebody gives us an ID of like 20 or something like that, right? Well, we're going to want to maybe like throw some sort of an error. All right. So we'll say if type of, and then we'll say planets, planes at ID is not equal to undefined. Okay. So before I go anywhere from here, what is this saying?
You have to type it.
If you have planets at this ID.
Yeah. So in other words, if the type of planets at that specific ID is undefined, that means that I've given an ID that's no good, right? It doesn't work. Okay, cool. So if it's not undefined, what do I want to do? Do I want to return out that planet? Like, let's look at this. Return planets. I keep misspelling that. Okay. All right, let's think about this. Where is this being returned from, however?
From the planet at that location.
Well, no, I shouldn't need to scroll up because we're only inside of this right here, right? So where is this actually being returned from? This function or this function?
From the function getPlanet ID.
No.
What do you mean?
No, it's actually being returned from that anonymous function right there.
No.
Yeah. Oh. I'm not going to repeat it, but yes. That's right? Okay. So instead, what used to happen, and this was kind of like pretty common with code, is that we would make these functions accept a couple additional arguments. And the arguments would be something like error callback, and success callback. Okay? And what this allows us to do is that if we were to get an error inside of this code that could take some time to run, right? Then we would run this error callback against whatever that error was. If we were successful, we could just run the success callback against whatever the return value was. All right? So let's do that. So instead of returning planets at that ID, what I'm going to do is I'm going to invoke the success callback function against planets at that ID. Okay? And then else, what would I do then? Yeah, I'd probably do error callback, and I would say something like, that planet does not exist. Okay? What did you say?
As far as we know.
Oh, as far as we know. Yeah, exactly. Good point. All right, cool. So now that we've got this function, this should enable us to reach in and try to grab a planet. So let's actually try to run this, right? So if we come down here, and I've got my code constantly refreshing down in the console here. Let's go down here, and we'll say get planet. I'm going to pass in some ID. Let's pass in 10. We know that that doesn't exist, right? I'm going to have an error callback function. Okay, so we'll say we're going to get back an error. And then what are we going to do with that error? Maybe we'll just console log it, actually. Let's do that, right? In this case, do I even need a success callback? Because I know it's going to fail, right?
Right.
All right, so that's all right. We'll just leave that off for the time being. So let's try this. Okay. Did you see how there was kind of a delay there? So I saved it, or maybe that wasn't clear. I saved it, and then the code kind of did its thing briefly, and then we saw our little error message. Okay? That was the delay that we programmed in there. So we programmed some delay in there to act like we had to go reach and get this from our database. What are some other things that might actually take some time and wouldn't happen right away? Okay, maybe, yeah. So if we were to sort of abstract that further, maybe reading a file, right? Anytime we're reading a file, well, that file might be pretty large, so it might take some time to do it. Another good thing, or another good example of something that could take some time might be making some kind of a request through the network, reaching out to some other service and trying to get some data, right? Okay, so we're essentially faking that sort of thing by running this setTimeout function. All right. Now let's go try to do it with a planet that we know does exist, and I'll say get planet 4, and now I'm just going to pass in no error callback. This is probably not great practice to pass in null. In fact, let me not do that. I'll just console.log if there's an error, right? Okay, so if there's not an error, let's take in some kind of a planet, because that's what we're returning, right? And then we'll say console.log got our planet, and then I'll just put a little colon here, and then we'll say what that value was, right? What the planet was. Function conjunction. Conjunction function. Okay. It did, right. So the first time we printed out this, right? And then when I saved it, we came down here. So it did both of those things for us. All right, cool.
Is that callback? Making the function inside of the function? Is that classified as callback? Or no?
Yeah, this is a callback right here, right? It's sort of like an inline callback.
Right.
Now I could bring that out if I wanted to. If we wanted to make this maybe a little bit more readable, I could say const get 5th planet, right? Equals this function right here. And then I could just pass that in directly, get 5th planet. Okay.
What is print out both?
Well, no, it's actually the 5th planet because we did 0 indexing, right? Yeah. Seeing if anyone caught that. What was what?
Well, why does it print out both?
Well, we're running both of these guys, aren't we?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So we had a couple things happening here. Yeah. Okay, no worries. All right, cool. Now let me ask you guys this: is there really any guarantee that the message that we're theoretically getting back from this guy, or the error that we're getting back from this, prints before the success of this?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe.
No, there's no guarantee.
10 seconds.
Now, so far, it's always happened that way, but I'm just asking: is it really guaranteed?
No, those are randomly. You have a random
Yeah. Let's see if we can cause another reload here, or I'll just restart it.
Make it more than 2 seconds.
Oh, finally! Finally, I was able to demonstrate my point. Right? So this time we actually got back our planet before that error came back. That could be kind of troubling, right? You've got your code here, and it's like, wait a minute, I'm expecting this to happen first. Well, now we're dealing with asynchronous JavaScript, right? So what do we mean when we say asynchronous?
Not at the same time.
Not line by line.
Yeah, so it means that the code, although it's initially being read in the order in which we expect it is, not everything is executing in the order in which we might expect, right? Okay, so that can cause us some trouble sometimes when we're writing different things because we're expecting something to happen in a particular order, but lo and behold, it doesn't. Okay, and things like when we're making requests to services or we're reading a file or we're reaching into our database or whatever, we don't exactly know how long those things are going to take place. They could take some time. All right. So what I'm going to introduce you guys today to is this concept of promises, which essentially is going to do the same thing that we're seeing here, only it's going to be a little bit different syntactically. It might be a little bit more friendly for you guys to use. So that's how a lot of older code was written, in the sense that we would get like an error callback function and a success callback function. And you would just pass in what those things were depending on what you wanted to have happen. Okay. So let's see how we might run, or might kind of do something similar but with promises. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this. And let me just grab what we had and I'll comment it out. Actually, whoops. Let me go down below. So down here, instead of doing setTimeout, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one of these things called a promise. I'm no longer going to take in an error callback and a success callback. Okay, so from my getPlanet function, what I want to return, let's call it getPlanetPromise, right, to sort of differentiate what it is. So I'm going to return an actual promise. Okay? And that caused massive yawns. All right, so we're going to return out a promise. When we create a new promise, there's something that we need to give it. Does anybody know what that is? Yeah. Well, we're not giving it resolve and reject. Specifically, what are we passing to it? A callback function. Okay. Our callback function, well, yeah, our callback function is then itself going to take in a resolve and a reject function. Okay, what did you say? Multiple layers, yeah. Okay, so actually, what could we do here? We could make this a little bit more readable by taking this resolve and reject out of here. So let's just say, we'll say const callback equals that. Okay, is that a little better?
Yeah.
Okay. Now the only thing that's maybe a little weird is that we've got an outer function and an inner function, but that shouldn't be too bad. All right, so inside that inner function, what I want to run is this same code where we were setTimeout something, right? Because again, we're trying to fake like this is going to take some time in the normal JavaScript world. Okay, so I'm going to setTimeout, and then what am I going to do if I successfully get a planet? Yeah, instead of success callback, I'm actually going to invoke this resolve function against it. Okay, and then if I get some kind of an error, I'm going to reject with this value right here. Okay, and then what I want to do is pass this callback into the promise. All right, you guys want to go through this line by line so that we're not like lost?
You just change the name.
Which one?
Instead of error function, you put the reject, and instead of success function, you put result.
Well, there was another difference here, which is that I'm not actually taking those in on my top level function, right? Resolve and reject are actually functions that the promise itself is going to give me. They're not ones that I need to write myself.
Oh.
Okay? All right. So let's talk about this. Andrew, what's going on line 36?
We're having a function called get funding promise.
Good.
We'll take some ID.
Takes in an ID. Are we invoking this yet?
Not yet.
No. So we just would go down here, right? And then there's no code after this yet. All right, so we're good. Let's say we've invoked this function and we're inside line 37. Stefan, what's happening there? You sound so enthusiastic.
So we're making a constant variable callback,
Okay.
which is we're taking an arrow function.
Okay. So my arrow function takes in what?
Resolve and reject.
Okay. What are those? Do we know?
So those are basically, I don't know. Callback. Those are,
We can
this
tell
is
they're
not-
functions because down here we tried to invoke them, right?
Okay, so
Yeah.
we're invoking it. So let's say if we if the type of planet ID is equal to
Oh, hold
this-
on. We haven't even gotten there.
Oh.
But so I was just saying. So the types of these guys, those are functions, right?
Oh, yes.
We agree on that.
Okay,
All right,
those
fair
are
enough.
functions.
Cool. And then what happens on line 18, Mark? Mark's like turning his head around. Like,
18?
38.
38.
oh, Jesus, sorry. My mistake. 18 is not even right.
Setting a timeout.
So we're calling this function
Oh, yes.
setTimeout.
Yes.
What does setTimeout do? Little help for Mark? Juan?
So inside the callback function, we are invoking the setTimeout function, and it takes in a anonymous function over there.
Okay.
Basically, a setTimeout function will set a delayed timer to execute the function later, execute the code later.
So what setTimeout is doing essentially, hey guys, listen up, is that it's saying we want to wait at least this long before we run this callback function. Okay? Now there's not a guarantee that it will run exactly the amount of time there that we specify. The guarantee is that it will take at least that long, maybe even longer. Okay? All right, good. So let's say that we've gotten past this point and enough time has elapsed and the callback then gets called. What happens then, Alejandro? So here we've now invoked our callback because enough time has gone by. So we're here on line 40. Mhm.
So in the if statement, let's say we activate the if statement, or let's say like
Activate an if statement.
that's
All right. You could just say we check, right? We're checking something.
We're checking if the if statement is undefined.
Okay.
Or
We're checking if what is
if the
undefined.
planet's ID is undefined.
Okay, so specifically this planets was an object, and I'm just trying to see, is that specific ID inside that object, right?
And then
So if it is, then what do we do?
it is, we resolve the planet's ID, and if it's not, we reject the string right there. The planet does not exist.
Okay. So this is like us pretending like an error has happened. When we invoke this reject function, we're basically saying, hey, something went wrong. I couldn't successfully find that planet, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Oh, question. How you do the equals or not equals?
Yeah, it's just you have to install a font called Fira code, and then you need to enable ligatures in your VS Code. Yes.
What's that? That's the equals and then the expression mark?
Exclamation mark. and
It's
equal.
the exclamation mark and then 2 equals after that. Yeah.
Question. So for the reject part, you without console.log. So how does that, this console.log be the string inside?
We'll get there. Yeah, we'll see what happens. But basically, if we don't catch this error that comes out of the promise, we'll get some kind of thing in our console saying it was an uncaught error. Okay. All right. So now what we're doing is we're returning this promise rather than just directly running the code like we were before, right? Okay. So now that we're getting back a promise, what we can do is we can sort of attach some callbacks to run whenever that promise successfully resolves. So when I've actually gotten to plan it back, then I can have a callback that will do something with it, right? Or if something went wrong, I can also have some function that will deal with the error. You guys know how we do that? Dot then would be for our successful situation, right? Dot catch would be some sort of an error happened. Okay, so let's try to invoke this function. Let's say get planet promise, and then I need to pass in some kind of an ID. Let's do one that we know doesn't exist. So we'll say an ID of 20. Okay, and since I know that's not going to give me any kind of success here, I can do a dot catch right here, right? So what do I want to have happen with that error? It's console.log, sure. Okay, and then let's open up our terminal so that we can see this here. Get planet is not defined. I was still, okay, hold on one second. I'll just console like that there. That planet doesn't exist. Now let's see what happens if I remove my dot catch right there. Uh-oh. I had an unhandled rejection, right? So it's saying your promise actually rejected, but you didn't have anything in the dot catch. So this didn't go well, but you didn't have code that would handle that. All right. Okay. Oh, that was the error that we were specifying up here. So inside of our function on line 43, we were rejecting it with that specific error, right?
So the console.log actually happens to catch.
Yes. Yep. So that's happening right there on line 54. We're just saying if this promise rejects for some reason, please just console log whatever the error was. All right. Okay, let's try one that does exist. So let's come down here and call this function again. Promise, say 6. Now we're going to need a dot then, right? And so we'll just say the planet that we get back. We'll console log out. The planet is. And then I'll just concatenate the planet name. Planet is Uranus. Wow, here's another example of how we can't guarantee the timing of this stuff, right? Did you see that we actually got the planet back before we got the error from this guy here? Yes, Alejandro.
Question.
Mhm.
Where are those numbers for?
Those are IDs of the planets.
IDs?
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah, so just a quick review. Up here at the top of the file, we created this big object called planets. See?
the numbers are the IDs.
Yes, exactly.
Like in MySQL, right?
Yeah, exactly. We can pretend like these are just their database IDs. Totally.
Back to the promise definition. What's it?
This one right here, right? Get planet promise.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I missed it, but in the if statement, the type of planet ID,
Mm-hmm.
why can't you just have if planet's ID or planet ID? It's not equal to the type of thing.
Yeah, part of the reason I'm doing that is because it's just better practice. If you just said if planets at ID. It might not work if the value for that was something like 0 or false. Even though there was a value in there, it would never trigger that if condition because the value itself was false.
So the type of is like built in with
Yeah.
JavaScript or
Yeah, type of is built into JavaScript. So you can use that to see like what is the type of data that I got out from that thing. So if it's undefined, that means that that key simply wasn't even in my object, right?
So what was the difference between we use promise or we didn't use it? What was the benefit of promise?
So the benefit is that it kind of gives us a little bit of a different syntax, right? So we can do .then and .catch. We can also chain promises together, which wasn't, I don't want to say it was impossible the other way, but with callbacks, you end up with more nested callbacks. Remember we kind of talked about callback hell a little bit? Now you can see that some of our code here is already drifting a little bit to the right. You see how it starts to become a little bit less readable as we get more and more inward? You have to think more about what's actually going on. Okay. Versus with promises, we could potentially chain some promises together. So what if I wanted to get one planet and then go get a second planet after that? So how could I do that?
So you can put another promise inside the, I would say, the first resolve callback
Mm-hmm.
to check the condition if I have already got my first planet. Is that something we should do?
Let's try this. So when the first one resolves, what I want to do is I want to do pretty much exactly what you were saying there, Juan, is that I want to go and get another one, right? So let's try this. So let's say get planet promise 3. Okay. Dot then. Should I say planet here too?
Yeah.
I want to avoid doing that because I've already got a variable in scope called planet. Right now, those things, because now what we have is a situation where I'm only going to have access to a different thing inside here, but I still want access to this guy here. All right. So let's call it something else. Let's call it like second planet. Okay, so we'll say console.log, and we'll say first is what? Planet. And then I'll add second is second planet. Okay. Still a little bit ugly because we're starting to drift to the right? But what I did kind of guarantee here is that I really am not doing anything with that second planet until I've successfully gotten back the first planet.
That's interesting. So it's like, I guess at the end of it, they have access to all the planets, like some timeline, right? This is the final thing you've done for the last then as opposed to second planets.
Yeah, it's kind of rough because we're still getting some of that, you know. All right. Yeah.
Right next to the number 3, is that period supposed to be with the dot over thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is, right? Because the get planet promise is returning me back a promise, and then I need to I need to invoke this then method in order to say what do I want to have happen once that successfully resolves.
It doesn't have to be right next to the period.
No, it could be down here. Yeah, we could do like.
Does that mean like we can
I kind of meant to do it like this, yeah. So, yeah, my bad. All right. So let me open this up here. Okay. So Uranus and Mars, that's what we were expecting, right? Okay. Now notice how at this point, this order is guaranteed. And the reason why is because I waited for the first one to resolve before I even ran the second one. Okay? There's one other thing that's actually a little bit better than that, and I'll show you guys this before we finish up because this is kind of one of my favorite things about promises. There's a way that I can do something called promise.all. Promise.all. Okay? And what promise.all takes in is actually an array of promises. Okay? So what are the two promises that I wanted? I can say get planet promise 6, right? That's my first one. Actually, I'll open this up so it's a little more readable. The second promise that I wanted was 3 or 4. Yeah, 3. Okay? Then I can have one dot then for both promises. So once both promises resolve, then I'm going to get back an array of all these fulfilled promises. Okay? So let's just console.log out what happens here. And then I'm going to comment this because this is like super ugly now. And let's run that. Okay? So what do we get there? We got an array with all of those fulfilled promises. I got my Uranus and my Mars. So what was cool about that is that I didn't need to wait. Let's say we were like making some network requests, 2 separate requests, right? I didn't need to wait for the first one to finish before I even made the second one. I could send them both off at the same time, wait for them both to resolve, and then do something with the result there. Right?
What happened if
Try doing that with callbacks.
for example, the first one has the ID that we have like 6. The second one, for example, it has number 10.
Okay. So what would happen there is that we're going to get an error, right? Which means it will be uncaught if I don't do a .catch inside here. So if you do a promise.all, the first error is gonna trigger the thing to reject essentially. So let's try that. So let's just change this guy to 10. Okay, now we've got that uncaught error, right, saying that planet does not exist.
How we can
And we can make this more specific too if we want to say the planet with ID, right? What's that?
You got to change the A to the E. You put that.
All right, thanks. Okay, so what would I do without you guys? All right. Okay, there. Oh, I need another space in there though, huh? Okay. Cool. So the planet with ID 10 does not exist, so it's angry at me. Fair enough. So that's kind of the thing here is that if I want to have multiple promises or multiple calls to my database, making calls to different services or something like that, I can bundle them all up in this promise.all and then wait for them all to resolve or reject, right?
If one of them rejects, then another.
Well, if it rejects, yeah, it's basically saying like all of our stuff failed, even though it might only be one piece of it that failed, right? Yeah.
Kind of validation.
So would we have to put a .catch inside of those parentheses?
So just like with a regular promise, we could do the same thing down here and .catch console.log, right? So this time it it didn't have an unhandled rejection. It actually gave us what the specific error was because we just logged it out.
But it didn't give us the one that actually worked.
Correct. Yeah.
So by
Because
default,
we
it
did
all
promise.all.
breaks, if one breaks,
Yeah, so promise.all is kind of like an all or nothing proposition, right?
Can we use it for the validation? For example, if you have a login and registration. If the
Well,
user
yeah.
puts-
So once we actually get to MongoDB and Mongoose and stuff, we're going to be using promises in there. That's kind of why I wanted to sort of introduce you guys to the concept, because that's how we're going to be interacting with it. It'll be something like get by ID, and then we'll have a dot then if we've successfully gotten that record from our database. Yeah. So it's not that won't be the validation itself, but if we don't successfully get a user from the database, we could say, hey, that user doesn't exist, right? Something like that.
Can you go back to the code that you pointed
The code that I commented out up here where we use callbacks.
out? I believe it's down at the bottom. Yeah, that part. I mean, but
That was kind of rough, right?
yeah. I was just wondering which design we know like those two pass it eventually, but which one comes back first?
Well, the one that's going to come back first is going to be this one, right?
First one, and then it runs to the next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so to guarantee the order of these things, we started having to nest callbacks, and that was pretty rough. I don't know about you guys, but I really don't like looking at that. But when we did promise.all, the order was guaranteed in the sense of whatever array that we got back, assuming that they both resolved, right?
Right.
So that was kind of nice. Okay, so in this sense, back to what we were talking about earlier, like let's say I had V go get me a coffee, and I had Andrew, and I had Andrew go get me a sandwich.
Who will get back first, right?
We don't know.
Yes, but one of us didn't get
But
back.
if I did a promise.all, I could just wait until they both get back because that's the time when I'm going to eat, right?
Right.
Or that's when I'm going to sit down and actually have whatever came back.
So if I wanted to make you a coffee, you wouldn't send it.
Yeah, exactly. So if you failed, if you didn't fulfill your promise, I'd be like, dang it, I can't sit down and eat. Something went wrong. Crap. The whole thing goes, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the downside of the all. So they all have to, yeah.
I guess is there other notation for partial success? So at least this way they all execute at the same time, but they still differentiate between.
Yeah, there are some different things with promises that you guys can look into. Let me see, MDN. Let's see, what else can we do? Promise.
Ending. Oh right, there was something about like its statuses or something like that.
Oh right, you know what? I did want to show you guys that real quick. So like once we what if I set this equal to a variable, this getPlanetPromise? I'll just say call it prom. And then what if I console log this down here? Am I expecting this to be the actual planet?
No, it's a promise.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wanted to throw that out there for everyone. So here, if I just say this, here I'm assigning a constant variable prom to the value to whatever this returns, right? What do you guys think that's going to be? Because I'm going to console log in on line 56. What am I going to see there? Well, what do you mean the same thing? The same as what? What this returns is not the actual planet. What it returns is a promise. Right? Our function was returning a promise, not a planet. This is a key distinction that you guys have to understand. So when we console log it out, it should say something like promise pending or something like that, right? when we first create the promise, what its status is pending. That means it hasn't yet been resolved or rejected. We don't know what's going to happen with that promise. So see it right there? Promise pending. Okay? So that's kind of counterintuitive for people. They're like, wait a minute, I thought that I was getting back the planet from that. No, you're getting back a promise of a planet coming in the future at some point.
That's interesting. So what value is pending with that status? So this way, if you're working with a variable of the promise itself, you can say, if prom dot whatever it is equals pending, that I do my other thing.
Yeah, well, let's do this. So inside my .catch, let's say that's an error, right? I'm going to console.log the prom at that point and see what it says. Still pending. Why is that? Shouldn't that promise be rejected at this point? I'm sorry, Juan, what were you saying?
Oh, I was saying that was this supposed to be like some sort of clause? So you put in an invalid ID number as the argument. So basically, the function will return you the promise that you reject, something like that.
Yeah, the promise, as far as we know, has been rejected, right?
Right.
Okay. So why would that be pending now?
Also, like, I'm a little confused in the syntax here because, like, you're referring to yourself. That seems weird. Like that prom right there is for that const prom.
Yeah.
Oh.
But wouldn't we expect its status to no longer be pending? I mean, that's the part that's kind of troubling me.
Where are you calling it?
Inside the my callback for an error. So inside the .catch. So we're passing in a callback function that should handle some kind of rejection here, right? So what if we got success here? Let me just do this. Console.log prom here. And what if I change this to a planet that actually exists? 3. Still pending. Huh. Yeah, I'll have to look into that one for you guys. Shouldn't be pending at that point since it's resolved, right?
Because we have the all conditions. Maybe just
No, Juan, we didn't actually use line 53 in our promise.all.
Maybe it's still running that delay when it's console logging.
Well, it should be rejected or resolved at this point, though, as far as I can tell.
I'm saying by the time you console log it, it's still running. So it's still pending. So if you're able to delay, maybe you actually get it resolved.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, let's try that then. Where was our delay? Somewhere in here. Okay, so I'll just comment this out, and we'll say 0, right?
Oh, I was gonna say, would it just be better to add delay to the final statement?
Okay, so that obviously doesn't do anything.
Can you do a 0 instead of 2000?
I just did. Made no difference.
No, instead of coming to the whole line, can you just make it 0 after the asterisk?
Well, how's that any different than me just passing in 0? I don't know. Like, what's the difference? That's exactly the same as what I just did, right? 0 times anything is still going to be 0.
What I was going to say is add a timeout for the promise console.log. So this way we know time-wise it'll happen after the completion of the function.
Okay. Yeah, like somehow give it all this time and be like, come on now. Be resolved, please. 3,000, right? I don't think that's gonna fix our issue, but we can try it.
No, it's undefined. Did we trash it? Is it completed? So there's like a tear down of promises.
Huh. All right. Sorry, this took a detour, and I don't want to like go off on the deep end, but I'll look into it for you guys and see what I can find. All right. All right. Yeah, pretty cool.
Thank you.
You're welcome.